It's a guy, a car, and a podcast.
It's a guy, a car, and a podcast.
It's a guy, a car, and a podcast.
It's a guy, a car, and a podcast. Buckle up.
Part of where the podcast becomes convenient for me as a host is I project, and I just can't not be loud in a situation. But I'm frequently talking to people that talk way down here when they're talking, and this is just how they present. And I'm thinking to myself, I really hope that's picking something up, because at some point I'm going to have to go in there and adjust so that the audience can hear it. But generally speaking, these microphones are great. It works. But the direction, you're asking me about this. Literally, like with Seth, with Jake, I sat down and I tried to walk them through their own mission to just get a feel of what their experience was like. And then the conversation just kind of organically went places. Like with Seth, he and I haven't talked outside of one reunion here where I came here. I was actually with who would become my wife at the time. And Seth was here, and I pulled him outside for just a second, and I'm like, how are you, man? And he presented himself that he was fine. But we hadn't talked since then, so it's been 14 something years. So arguably the reason this entire film's even happening is because 9 some odd months ago, Seth texted me, and he was just like, hey man, I just want to let you know that recently I found my way back to the church, and it was a very powerful experience, and I just wanted you to know that I'm really sorry about Meadville and about everything that happened. That wasn't okay, and you carried so much more of that burden than maybe I've even given you credit for until now, and so I'm just sorry. And we ended up having this back and forth that was so cathartic for me. I wasn't even sure that he was the kind of guy that would ever get to a place where that was something he would even feel like he needed to say to me. And so I was just carrying around this burden for 15 years of this mess that happened. And so we sat down, and it's all we talked about for 2 hours. Just where he was at in his head at the time. And we cried. It was such a good conversation. And the whole thing's on film and I've got to figure out, a podcast, obviously I can just throw it up and whatever. But I've got to figure out how to take all of these beautiful things that he said and not let them dominate an entire film. But as far as, I guess, the beginning of your guys' story, in specifically relation to the mission, one of the things that amused me when I thought about talking to you guys was, for, 19-year-old boy, we seek to go on a mission. We fill out an application, we go through interviews and things like that, and then if we're lucky, we get a call back and we get to go and serve. You did not have that experience. Your call to serve came in a much less conventional way, and that fascinates me. Can you expound on what happened?
Sure. Okay. We were surprised to get a call from Elder Neil Maxwell's office, and we couldn't imagine what it was about, but we went up to Salt Lake and met with him, and he explored the possibility of our serving a mission. We weren't called at that point, but just...
So he was just observing the terrain. He was just trying to figure out where you guys were at that point, and
was saying that we were being considered to be called.
Okay.
So then we knew that was a possibility.
But he did say, you might be called back or you might not be called back.
Yeah.
After this fact gathering to determine whether it was a time in our life when we could serve and if there was an appropriate place for us to serve.
Yeah.
But it came just totally out of the blue. We had no sense that it was happening, and even as we drove up, we were thinking about a lot of different things that it might be, and not one of them had to do with serving.
Church hosting or something in Salt Lake, or we didn't know anything, but so we were surprised, and it was wonderful visiting with him.
Was that the first time you had met him?
No, Scott was in his ward.
Oh, okay.
So when he moved into my parents' ward when I was on my mission.
Oh.
And so I did not know him well, because after my mission I went back to school in California.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew that he was a great leader, even at that time. And so to have a call from him to go speak to him was really a momentous thing. Even though I did, know him and he knew me by name, our paths had just not crossed very frequently, except, for that initial period of time, really, from the time I returned from my mission until I went back to school.
Mm-hmm.
But he was someone that was very influential with people of our age, college age, were drawn to him. His thoughts, the way he expressed himself, we all really loved him and loved to hear what he had to say. So it was really, we really felt humbled and honored to be called in to speak with him. And, just someone that we had always really admired and appreciated.
At that phase, was he just an accomplished academic, or had he actually achieved is the wrong word, been sustained into church callings, I guess?
No, he was an apostle at that time.
Oh, okay. Wow.
But when I had met him, it's what was when I was 21, and we lived in the same ward, except I went away to school.
Yeah.
And then this was 30 years later.
Yeah.
So we'd had,
very
little contact with him.
But when you met him before you went off to college, he was an apostle at that time?
No. He was an academic at the University of Utah. He was academic vice president. Oh. And then he was called to be commissioner of education for the church. Almost simultaneously with me getting back from my mission.
Was that basically when the BYU speeches that he gave started picking up? When he was the commissioner of education?
Yes.
Okay.
And then he was ordained 70 and then an apostle.
Yeah. So what was the time frame between that meeting of just checking the terrain and you guys actually getting the call?
It was the next week.
Oh.
And then we were called to meet with President Faust.
Wow.
And that's when the call was issued.
What year was that? Was 2000, I guess?
2000.
When you recall?
Mm-hmm. It would have been in November of 2000.
So at that time, President Faust would have been in decent health, or was he starting?
He was in very good health.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
nice.
Just a remarkable.
And then you were set apart by Elder Maxwell.
I was set apart by Elder Maxwell,
and I was set apart by Elder Bruce Hafen. They were both there.
Is that common for the setting apart to happen on two different?
For both of them to be there, I don't know.
I'm guessing they came as a companionship because everywhere you're sent in the companionship. But
yeah, so this was in Elder Maxwell's office, and Elder Hafen, who also was a general authority at that time, came over to his office.
Yeah, he's another accomplished academic. Great. His talks, his messages are they're
very thoughtful.
Yeah, very condensed. He just has a lot to say with few words.
Elder Hafen is Elder Maxwell's biographer. He's the one who wrote the biography.
Wow. Well, now I have to read that biography.
They were very close.
But we received the call, but we didn't know where we were going.
Oh, okay.
Until
a couple of months later.
Right. And we couldn't tell anyone that we had a call.
We couldn't even tell our children.
We didn't know where we would be going.
I mean, knowing you as I think I do, I imagine that would have been the worst few months of your life, having to walk around and have this thing inside of you that you kind of need to talk to somebody about. You need to start processing and getting it out, but you basically can only talk to each other about it. And
it actually, It wasn't terrible because we were thrilled to have been called. I mean, we just thought, wow, the trust that was put in us was surprising and astonishing, and so I think even though it would have been nice to be able to talk to people about it, it wasn't like it was torture or anything. It was just waiting. So,
and I think trying to adjust to it ourselves.
right,
because
thinking
it
about our
was-
future and our children, because we had children that would go with us.
Yeah.
So,
That, I mean, I don't know the history of families going on missions because, you know, the couple was called to go preside over a mission, but I mean, knowing Sarah and Julie as little as I did, I just always thought it was so profound that their whole lives just got moved to Pittsburgh for a few years. And they just had a great attitude about it. They loved the missionaries, and I didn't even get to really see them go out, but I understand they went out on exchanges and
they went on some exchanges. Their influence was probably more with the friends in high school and the experiences there. That was where they were their strongest missionaries. Was there.
So it was the biggest sacrifice for Sarah because she was starting her senior year.
That's
And
right.
In fact, she was wondering at first whether she would go with us or she would stay here and live with her married sister. And her seminary teacher knew that she was struggling with the idea, and he called her into his office and called Elder Zwick on the telephone, who was
the area authority.
Okay.
And basically, Elder Zwick said, you know, this is your decision, and your parents will be fine either way.
And she should not feel badly if she chose to stay home.
And she finally decided that she would come, but it was very difficult because all of the things her friends were doing at home, she would get letters from them. They would be going to dances together, having fun. And she basically was in a high school with 6 other Latter-day Saints, not knowing anyone, and it was her senior year.
And she was going to be in the a cappella, the school choir probably would have been on a seminary council.
Other
things.
Just
so
gone.
So
all gone.
And she, when you're dropped into a high school as a senior, it's really hard to find a path. But she became very good friends and it became a mentor for the Crosley children and some of the others that were in the high school, the younger ones. And in fact, our friend
Dwight Ferguson, who was in the bishopric.
Oh yeah.
He said we all call her Saint Sarah because she used to tutor the children in math and chemistry. And so her experience was a very interesting one. She became a medical technician and worked in Dr. Bushman's office while she was going to school, and we were so interested. We didn't know how hard it was for her. And then at Thanksgiving time, we realized that it had been how lonely it had been for her at the high school. So we let her come back to Utah at Thanksgiving and stay until Christmas. She was so strong academically that it didn't hurt her in terms of her grades, and then she came and had a wonderful time. But she said she knows that it was the right decision.
And she would not trade. She said no. She said it was a wonderful experience. And she and Julie became very close. In fact, and their experience was very different because Julie got right immediately into the soccer team and then started running and kind of became well known as the Mormon girl from Utah because the first race she ever ran in, she played soccer, then to stay in shape they went to indoor track. She beat the Western champ in Pennsylvania in a relay. And she didn't have cleats. I mean, she didn't have
She had
spikes.
tennis shoes, and she was running.
Her coach came up and said, "Would you get her some shoes?"
And she had never run track before, and she was a very good basketball player. But basketball interfered with early morning seminary, so she decided that she wouldn't play. And a friend of hers said, "Well, why don't you go out for indoor track just to stay in shape for the soccer season?" So the track coach's wife was the secretary in the office who made all of the announcements, and so she would announce all of the cross country and track meets, and so Julie's name was mentioned very, very frequently, and so consequently the missionaries that worked in Bethel Park and Upper St. Clair they said, "Oh, well, we know Julie Cameron, and on the bus, and we're met in a lot of places." So she was one of our very strongest missionaries. And she didn't even know that she had this gift for running.
And ultimately, she went to the Pennsylvania State meet, and she took 3rd place in the 800 meter.
Wow!
And totally shouldn't have happened, but we felt like it was for the mission. I mean, she was good, but she wasn't that good. I don't know that it should have happened, but it really was quite a miracle that happened. So they had, and they became very close sometimes when we needed to be gone.
Yeah.
They would go to seminary together, and they actually had to get special permission to drive because at their high school you couldn't drive, you had to ride the bus.
Oh.
But we got special permission, and they did really bond together. They were. So.
I never knew the detail about Elder Zwick beforehand, and
Sarah.
Sort of being involved in the Sarah thing. So for him to visit the mission, because he was the first that I remember visiting the mission, must have been sweet, considering that he sort of had that impact on her decision to come. Did he stayed with you guys, right, at the mission home, right, when he came?
No, Elder Zwick came before us, didn't he?
Yes, he came.
Oh, did he?
He actually...
Wasn't I there, though?
No.
I guess I wasn't.
He came, but our first visitor was...
Elder Conde,
Spencer Conde, who was the first counselor in the area presidency. Elder Zwick was the area president. Elder Zwick came to speak at a stake conference, but didn't ever speak at a mission conference.
Oh.
He didn't stay with us, but
okay.
Scott knew Elder Zwick from college days.
Well, from 7th grade.
Oh, he knew him.
Okay.
So there was a connection.
So we were all there when he was there. He just wasn't coming in a mission capacity. He was just coming to speak to a state conference.
That's right.
Got it. So maybe you had even been to Pennsylvania before coming as missionaries, but I mean, what was your, you live in Provo, Utah, so outside of the humidity, Pennsylvania is probably not all that much different than here. What was your first impression of, who, I'm guessing missionaries picked you up at the airport, or did you guys drive there, or how did that work?
They picked us up at the airport.
So who did you meet first?
So, first, our impressions, we had never been to Pittsburgh, never been to Pennsylvania. When we heard about Pittsburgh, we thought, that's an industrial town.
Or was.
And so, and it was, but, the steel industry had really left, 15 years before. So we were just kind of overcome with how beautiful it was, how green it was, how many deciduous trees,
we had no idea that it was so beautiful. We just thought, it'll be industrial, but we'll be okay.
Yeah.
But at the airport, it was fascinating because President Cooney was a wonderful mission president. He was a very strict mission president. And we didn't even realize how blessed we were until to have followed him until 3 months later when we had a conference with the mission presidents in the Northeast and the other mission presidents who had gone to other missions in the Northeast were talking about their experience and some of the things that they had encountered, and we just went.
Because our missionaries
don't act like that.
They were so good. It was Elder Rhodes and Elder
Smithson,
and then Elder Mockley was in the office, and Elder Lenhoff, So, but the ones that met us there, I guess those might have been.
Yes,
before I-
and that was before there was restrictions, so they could come right up to the gate. And there they were standing there, just
sentinels,
almost military bearing. They were so good, and President Cooney and Sister Cooney were so gracious to us and really wonderful. So we came in, and the mission was in very, very good shape, and we didn't even know how blessed we were, as I mentioned, until we talked to other mission presidents, and we realized that President Cooney had done a marvelous job. And Sister Cooney, I think, we don't know them well because the transition is about 2 hours. and that's really a healthy thing because all of us have experiences with people and form opinions of them, and none of that is transferred. You're just said, here are the missionaries, and there are no notes there about anything that any of them have done or not done, and so it was just so wonderful to meet all of the missionaries without any preconceived ideas. Just meet them and enjoy them.
Did that happen all at once? Did you call a mission conference and that, or did you just go zone to zone to zone and meet them that way?
Yeah, they had zone conferences scheduled, so we had 3 in the first week we were there, and by the first week we had met all of the missionaries.
And we had missionaries leaving and missionaries arriving within 2 weeks.
Within a couple of days of our arrival.
It just happened to be that the timing was that we had transfers right when we arrived. So
Did your process of receiving missionaries change from that very first time to maybe 6 months down the road?
No, we followed their routine, and they had a very orderly routine where the missionaries would come into the mission home that were leaving. They would stay overnight, and then we would take them to the airport, and then the new missionaries would come later that day, and we'd go back to the airport, bring them to the mission home.
Actually brought them to
Green Tree Chapel. And we had lunches for them to eat, and then they met their companions, and then were dispersed.
Straight out is the experience you had.
Which is,
and then we had 2 weeks later, they would come in where we would have an
all-star training.
The training.
Good times.
So that we could get to know them, and I just loved the way we did that. I just thought that worked really nicely.
Because then the missionaries were no longer shell-shocked. They kind of had a sense of what was going on, and they were so happy to see one another. After a couple of weeks.
You need a little bit of familiarity, a little bit of normalcy after being cooped up with brand new guy because that's, as a missionary, at least, a young missionary, you go directly to the MTC, and I don't have college life experience, but my guess is that's what it's like, just the dorms and people going everywhere, so you're just so surrounded by people like you that when you hit the field, and that first night when you drive out to your apartment and it's just you and this guy that you just met, and he's like, there's your bed, see you in the morning, it's just so solitary. Immediately you're just in the thick of, I guess I get to be my best friend now until I figure out who this guy is. And
so I think that's a really important point that is so amazing about the mission field, to think that 2 individuals who have never met together are put together and said, you're going to be together 24/7, deal with it. And that it works out as successfully as it does. And sometimes, there are some rough edges that need to be knocked off. But I think absent being in the mission field, absent having been set apart as missionaries, absent the Spirit, it's almost impossible to think of that it could happen.
Yeah.
That 2 people with different cultures, different family values would just be put together and asked to work together.
Yeah.
100%. And it works out more often than not.
Yeah. Now I wonder how unique the circumstance was, specific to the fact that you, Sister Cameron, had an impressive medical background that put you in a position once you guys got there that there wasn't a need for a mission nurse. You acted as mission mom and mission nurse. Is that common?
I think it was at the time that the mission president's wife hopefully could handle that and then refer them to missionary medical. It was a distinct advantage having that medical background and I loved it because I got to know the missionaries that way much better because we had daughters there. I didn't go to the interviews with him, and so being able to talk with them, and it was interesting though because there were 2 times you could call. In the morning, I can't remember what the time was, a half an hour, and then there was starting at 9:30 at night. You could call. I remember Julie would go, the phone is ringing again.
I'm not sure the missionaries knew how blessed we were to have Sister Cameron, but because she had worked at the missionary training center before, she knew the personnel, she knew the procedures, she knew how to talk to the people from missionary medical. So you can imagine another mission president's wife who is well-meaning and everything, but she doesn't know how to describe someone's symptoms to another medical personnel to get the proper training. And Sister Cameron did know. She knew exactly how to describe it and then how to get the correct response from missionary medical in terms of authorizing.
You had to have everything authorized, and if you didn't know how to present it so that they could get an appointment, it would be a problem. And I knew enough that
I could get anyone an appointment if they needed one. And that was
I could describe
that was really a blessing.
And it was helpful.
Then to have 2 medical doctors in the mission who were very familiar with the program and
willing to help,
willing to see the missionaries who may not be sick enough to be able to go to a doctor but still needed to be helped, and they would open their homes after hours, and missionaries would come by and be able.
I don't think I even know who that was. Who was
Dr.
that?
Campbell, and then did Dr. Bushman?
Dr. Bushman.
He did too.
Wow.
Okay.
I guess I just never took sick or anything.
And Dr. Campbell's son was on a mission in Salt Lake City, and so he was just thrilled to help.
To
and
participate.
There would be, because our mission was relatively small geographically, quite a large number of them could go to his home to be diagnosed and get some medication or be told what to do. So in that way our missionaries were blessed.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I mean, every missionary loves their mission mom. That's just beyond question. But outside of the fact that you're just a tender human being, like I never had any health issues that I can remember anyway. But there's something about the fact that as a child, when it hurts, you go see your mom. There's something about the fact that that's where you would go that was just soothing. It was nice.
I think that's why I loved the missionaries, because I did feel like I could help. And you just feel that because you know that their mom isn't there.
Yeah.
So that's a kind of...
And I'm guessing as a result of that, I didn't even think about that until this moment, that you probably developed some interesting relationships with missionaries' mothers because they understood your
on
connection.
Occasion, but generally the mothers were pretty good about not...
leave it to be like.
Yeah, I mean, they most of the communication would, unless it was something urgent or something where they might have to go home. The missionary would be the one that would communicate with them about their issue.
Oh, that's nice.
And then they would call if there was a concern.
Yeah.
So I did, but really not too many mothers.
But there was a time, when they called. If you remember, the September 11th happened that year.
Since I hit.
In November.
November 2001, like I was after that, but I can only imagine.
Okay, so, September 11th, and, a plane crashes.
The flight was 10 minutes away from Pittsburgh.
Yeah, was it Somerset, I guess, or just south of that?
Just outside. It was not in our mission, but it was close enough by plane. It was
within
10
minutes.
5 minutes. Maybe 5 minutes. Yeah, it was very close.
So we had parents, the phone ringing off the hook with parents concerned about their missionaries.
Yeah.
But that was also a really interesting time in that generally, as you know, people in Pittsburgh, they're just wonderful people and they can become great friends, but they're very private people. And because of 9/11, there was just a spirit of we're all citizens of this country, and we had people being much kinder to the missionaries for several months after that in terms of inviting them in and feeling of the general community spirit. So
and I think the whole country felt that.
Yeah.
We felt united and there to care for one another. And I still remember taking Sarah to a podiatrist appointment. I had to go clear into the city, and we were waiting a long time, and we saw the traffic starting because it was 5 o'clock at night, and we were thinking we'll never get home. And someone said, "Oh, look at all that traffic," and this other woman said, "Let's be grateful there is traffic." You know, I mean, it was profound, the feeling there, and people were thinking about God and about who they were in relationship to Him and to one another, and it really was.
I think I might have taken that for granted, that I came in the middle of that, so I arguably came in not seeing the difference between what people were like before that and what people were like when I actually did show up. And so you guys get to Pittsburgh and begin to fill the role. I mean, you're both very accomplished people and very experienced in various forms of administration and business and all sorts of things. I mean, what spun your mind about it? What about it was just overwhelming?
Being responsible for 150 to 170 young people, and caring about them, how they were doing physically, how they were doing emotionally, how they were doing spiritually, how they were doing in terms of their interaction with one another, whether or not their needs were being met. It's like going from being a parent in a nuclear family of 6 children to all of a sudden having all of these children who although they're on the verge of adulthood, are not quite adults, and trying to meet their needs and trying to understand them. And that it is the constancy that people remark about, just like the telephone ringing. That was before cell phones, and the phone would ring in your home, and you would answer it. The other thing is just being in charge of people that are spread out over a large geographical area that you don't know. And
so if something's wrong in Jamestown, you're like, well, I mean,
and Pittsburgh,
be there in 5 hours or whatever.
Pennsylvania was voted at that time by the Truckers of America as the most difficult state to get around because of
highways.
the highways were all, someone said it's like you cook a bowl of spaghetti and throw it down on the ground. And so,
that's it.
Because of the hills,
hills.
That's the way it had to be, really.
Yeah.
And so it was.
And, Sister Cameron has always loved maps and reads maps well. And so she would look at the map and she could see exactly how things were laid out, and she memorized things. Because often in a marriage, when there are 2 couples, you assign roles to people, and hers was the map person, but I was the person who had to drive out to see the missionaries
by himself, so he didn't have the map.
And and I didn't have someone to read the map, and so I've never prayed harder.
And he always got there. And he always did. I mean, it was just a miracle.
And the way people would give directions, that say, "Will you turn at the Piggly Wiggly on this street?"
Goes, and
and actually, they had written instructions for how to get to all of the missionary apartments. But you can imagine, you can't read those while you're driving. And so literally, I would have to pray myself there, and it would be a miracle. At least I thought it was initially, when I would find the chapel where we were having the district meetings, or if I needed to go to an apartment, I'd find the apartment.
One other challenge when we first arrived, too, is it was in the summer, and our neighborhood in Upper St. Clair was a wealthy neighborhood.
Yeah.
And people were off on vacation. Children were at summer camps or wherever they went. And it took us a long time to get a sense of the community.
Oh,
But
yeah.
when Julie started playing sports, that was a way to tune into the community, and that was really helpful for me. I got to know people in the community through her sports and through some of the things that Sarah did too, and so it was an interesting thing because we were the Mormons, and people kind of kept their distance for a while.
Yeah.
So.
And I wonder if some of that might have had to do with previous. Because how long was that mission home in the? Do we know?
Yes, the mission home had been there. It was built, and then the mission president moved in, and it had been there for over 24 years. And interestingly enough, the church that always has such a good eye for real estate. It was a lovely home, but really quite modest for the neighborhood. Then as other people bought tracts, these very large homes went up. And we were so interested in finding out, we had a hard time meeting our neighbors, and so finally Sister Cameron baked brownies, and we went around to meet them. And we went to this one house, and when the woman opened the door, she started crying. And she said, I became so close to the last two.
To the Coonies.
To the Coonies and the people just before them. And she said, I decided I couldn't break my heart again, so I wasn't even going to meet you. And then because of that, she did, and she became a lovely and gracious friend. But you don't think about that. How
coming and going,
and how people form really close attachments, and then there's a new person on the block.
Wow.
The members of the church, especially Sarah and Julie's age, not just in our ward, but in the adjacent wards, were so kind to invite them to do things. And that was really a lifesaver, or else that summer would have been a total disaster.
Because they were so lonely. In fact, I still remember we had met the Haglunds. They were in the other ward in our building. But so we got a call, and we didn't catch it in time, but it said Haglund. So I called it back and said, did you just call us? Because our daughters were so lonely. I didn't say that, but they were inviting them to do something, and we were so grateful because they were really feeling lonely. So that was a blessing that people were so nice, were so kind.
This might seem like an odd question, but I didn't find out until, I guess, as the mission president, you shared from time to time stories of your own mission, but I think there's details that just didn't come up because maybe they weren't relevant to the reason you were telling those stories. So I didn't find out until much later that you were assistant to the president in your mission, and it led me to wonder if that had any impact, just your own experience of being called to a position of important responsibility, that your job is to train and to set a pretty strong example for the other missionaries to lead the mission as an actual missionary. I wonder if that impacted your calling of assistance as you moved forward in your mission presidency.
That's an interesting question. I think that one's experience with his mission president or her mission president and their wife is a key in that. That's my only experience. And I had two mission presidents. My first mission president was this wonderful, warm person, but he had not been on a mission as a young man. In fact, he had been inactive in the church. And then he had come back to activity and had been bishop of his ward for 10 years. And they were, the stake had asked him to find a couple that would go on a full-time mission. And he couldn't find anyone, so he volunteered himself and his wife. And they were called to England and to be, to just work in a branch. And he was a counselor in the branch presidency. And after he had been there for 6 months, Elder Marky Peterson came to him and said, now I'd like you to find a mission home. So he went out and found a house that would be nice, and and purchased it for the church. And he said, "Now I'd like you to be the mission president." And so a new mission was formed with him having, no experience as a missionary, and he gained his experience from the missionaries from 3 different missions that were put in his mission boundaries.
Wow.
And he just was such a warm, wonderful person.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's influential in terms of leadership style that you see,
Mm-hmm.
and in terms of the way you think a mission should be organized. So your question is really interesting, whether or not that affected the people that were selected to serve.
And just your own feelings about even extending that call, because it's not like the pride of, oh, look what I've achieved. It's the weight of, this is what I need to do. And having lived that yourself, I wonder if that impacted you.
We were just so blessed in terms of having Elder Rhodes and Elder Smithson and Elder Mockley and Elder Van Hoff.
Mm-hmm.
And
I've got a menopause. He's from Canada.
He's from Canada. He's a wonderful missionary. He was super, super organized. And he was the mission secretary. The new mission president has to learn everything about the mission from the first people who were assistants. And so they were just terrific. Mm-hmm. They were obedient, strong missionaries, knew how to do missionary work, but were just really fine people. And so I think it's almost, you come and there's a culture in a mission that you inherit. And that affects how the mission develops too, not just the ideas of the new mission president. Because a mission president, when you go through the mission president's training, they said, now, presidents, don't tear down any fences for at least 6 months until you find out why they were erected. Mm-hmm. And that's really true. You would see something and we would think, oh, that's quite a strict rule. And it was only after you'd had the experience that you could see why that rule was in place. And so as we mentioned, going to the mission president's training that they held 3 months later, and hearing from other missionaries that maybe didn't have the fences erected quite as with square corners, we would find out things that they had to deal with that we didn't have to. And so again, as I say, that's why we were so blessed to have come after President and Sister Cooney. Yeah. Then the other thing with regard to the missionaries is one of the things you observe is how other missionaries feel about missionaries. So you can have someone who has very strong skills and is a fine missionary in terms of dealing with his own area, but if he's not the kind of person that could rally the support of other people and empower them to become better, then maybe that missionary shouldn't be put in a leadership position. Where somebody else, because of kind of the universal support from his or her peers that they were looked up to, it's kind of like people would appear and you would say, oh, okay, that person has the confidence of others and they can lead others.
Which sort of almost makes me wonder, and this is sort of really off topic, but just drew something to my mind that I guess I've been curious about for kind of a long time, is when you think about the Jesus-Lucifer argument, conundrum, circumstance, that I guess it's one of those things where when I think about how God loves all of his children, and I think about what Lucifer did, as it has been explained to us, as far as rebelling against something, mostly because it just seems like he had his own idea about how it should actually be running, and he just wasn't willing to let go of that. That instinct or that behavioral whatever, that sort of selected him as then playing this role in all of our lives and what have you, versus Jesus, just the selection of him as the Savior wasn't necessarily when he stands up, I'll pick him. It was inside of him from the day that he was organized. Like, it was just who he was, and very similar to the way that you described, like how these zone leaders, these assistants, these district leaders just sort of rise or stand out. You can just see that in them. It makes me wonder if, I guess what I'm saying is it makes me wonder how early even God, our Father, knew what roles they were all going to play, and was then, I guess, given time, given the eons of us being with him in pre-existence, to sort of make his own peace with the way everything was going to play out and with who was going to choose what and go where, just because he could see it in them. He could see their intentions and what have you.
Well, that's really a profound thought, and that's one that I hadn't thought to the same degree. But I do know that it's possible for a person to have brilliance and not have the heart and not have the love to be their best self.
Yeah.
And it's a very interesting thing. Things are just so circumstantial in terms of leadership, and so ephemeral in a way, in that sometimes it's a timing of when you were called to the mission field and when there's a vacancy. And so there were so many more missionaries who had the ability and the love and confidence of other missionaries to serve as leaders. There were so many more than there were leadership positions available. And so sometimes your greatest leaders are those who lead and affect other people on the peer level just by who they are and by their example, and they may never be called to be the bishop. And yet, you live with people for 30 years in a ward, and you say, oh, that is such a remarkable person, or that family is so remarkable in the way they not only have nurtured their children, but nurtured the whole group of people.
Yeah.
And so that's why you all of us may have a leadership position, and we hope we do okay, but there's nothing magic about it. Every missionary has the exact same calling, and no missionary has all of the gifts, and all of them have some gifts, and it is in the coming together in companionships, in districts, in reinforcing one another, that strength is developed. And when you have that unity within a large group of people, wonderful things happen. You could have a well-oiled machine or a corporation that may be successful and get products out there, but that's not the same as when you're working with Heavenly Father's children. When you're trying to go out and lift other people and bring happiness to them and bring them to Christ, whether or not they join the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or not. And it was that level of goodness of 150 people supporting one another, all in the same cause, that I think was such a blessing, to the people that lived in the mission boundaries.
And one thing too that was interesting to me was what especially Scott observed was that all the missionaries had gifts, and that sometimes what one missionary did, which might not have seemed like it was grand, but given where they came from, what they did,
the context was just, of what they did,
remarkable to see what they were able to do, and you didn't want to ever evaluate what one missionary did as opposed to another, because you didn't know what their situation was.
Thank you so much for reminding me of that, because early on I had an experience where I would interview all of the missionaries before they left the mission field,
Mm-hmm.
and as their mission president, give them a blessing.
Yeah.
And I hadn't been there very long, and a person came in, and I thought, well, they were a pretty good missionary. And then when I put my hands on their head to give them a blessing, I just was overwhelmed with Heavenly Father's love for them and how much they had grown. And after they left, I sat down and I went, wow, I thought I had an idea, a gift of discernment. How did I miss that one? And it just came to me so clearly is that I did not know where they came from or started. I only saw where they were growing. That this missionary had grown an enormous amount, even if maybe he still wasn't at quite the level of some of the other missionaries. I'm going to need to get a drink.
Okay.
Sister Cameron is
time.
I think our kids might be here early.
Oh, good times.
So come over here, girls.
Come on in.
You have to all be in this picture.
No,
Yes.
no.
No, we want them. Come here, Mia. Come here.
I love the
Here.
resistance. It's my
Okay.
favorite. She's like,
Okay.
not doing
All
it.
right, here. That's okay. You can just say hi, and then you can go upstairs and I'll get you something to eat. Okay. All right.
Oh, goodness.
Okay, no, don't hang up.
Oh,
Yeah, I want to wrap this up and get out of your hair so you can have family time. So,
we've accomplished a lot.
we did. We did. Yeah. Yeah, well, there we go. I didn't want to So, we're gonna wrap this up.
This is to
so
be
you
continued. Okay.
Yeah, there's definitely more to talk about because your experiences.
So far, we're into the mission field 2 months.
Right. Yeah, I'll have to figure out a way that we can do a second half of this, and but this has been great. Thank you guys for making the time. Being
It's been nice for us. Nice for us to remember. It's been a blessing.
Sorry that we're so wordy, but it is so exciting, thinking
Someone
about
wants
these
to
experiences.
remember it with us. That's
And that is just something funny. And that you come back from the mission and you have so much to talk about and people are interested for 1 hour and then no one asks you any questions and you have so much to give. And I guess we hadn't learned that until we started reminiscing and talking about it and realizing what a wonderful experience it was.
Yeah.
So
So
thank
much
you,
to it.
Adam.
My pleasure.